Hey folks, today we're headed out on Lake Okeechobee with Bradley Hallman, who just won the FLW Tour event there. He's going to show us how he got it done.
The 8-pounder, the first day came from there, the one I hooked yesterday.
Your other big one.
A couple of the second day came from this side of it. I don't know if you realized that.
Yeah.
But the day you were with me, one or two of the big ones came from this side.
This
of the
little
head. And then
I texted back. After you lost that one and you were stuck in there, I was like, I think he might just stay here the whole rest of the day and not even move and just try and get one more bite.
That's what happened. And Shin fished. A lot of his big fish were coming out of that head right there.
Yeah.
That one and 2 or 3 down from there, he'd start. But
he
kind of each morning after this thing started going, he kind of just let me come in here and pick where I wanted, and then he'd just kind of go to the next 1 or 2 over.
This is a special reed head to me, probably the rest of my life, huh? $100,000 reed head. But see, when you get weather like this and it starts warming up, like when I found them in practice, they would be out here on this isolated stuff. I mean, stuff that I was running over in the tournament because they just
weren't there.
No, they'd buried up by the end. But yeah, when I found them, they'd be out here in this stuff. And what I noticed yesterday, when it started warming up, the sun, the stuff that they were on was that horizontal brown stuff like that, and I think the sun warms it up. And so the fish were at the top. So like you'd flip in there and you might not get a bite.
Until you brought it up to
the
surface.
And then when you brought it up towards the surface, that sucker goes thunk. They were sitting up there right underneath it.
So Bradley, this is the kind of stuff you were flipping in the tournament. What got you started flipping this, and how in practice were you doing the same thing, or did the fish move around on you?
In practice, I knew that I wanted to be fishing somewhere where the vegetation was sticking above the water. So that ruled out anything that was like this hay grass fields out here and stuff, submerged. I didn't want to do that. Reason being, just a lot of the videos and TV stuff that I'd watched. I mean, most of the guys, I'm a visual fisherman anyway. I like to see what I'm throwing too, and so I kind of came down here with that mindset that I wanted to be flipping some type of vegetation that was sticking above the water. And of course the canes were something that comes up over and over and over and over. And it just kind of evolved because there's the pencil reeds here, that are different than the canes.
Yep.
And I flipped a bunch of those. I flipped a bunch of just cane fields up on the north end that look a lot different than this. They're not really, they're reed heads, but they're more abundant. It's just a wall of them for miles and miles and miles.
It's not a little bit isolated like this stuff.
And then some of it's even the further stuff out further to the lake it's not matted like this, like a matted reed head. It's more like what this is. They're more open, where you could actually drive a boat through them even though they're thick. You don't have all the lay down stuff because the waves and the water have cleaned them out. So there was a lot of different types that I tried during practice before I stumbled upon this.
All right. And then in this stuff, I mean, were they always in the same spot? Because we saw on the last day, I mean, you had your boat way up in them, and you were flipping back into the very middle of this stuff.
Right. Early in the week when the weather was nice, and had been nice for a while, the fish were more on the outside edges, the points of this stuff, and the mats where the mats would meet the reed head. From all this torn up, pads and grass and stuff. We kind of call them trash mats because that's really what they are. They're just from all the boat traffic and stuff, and then the wind pushes them in here. And they would be on the edge of that. One of the key places that I keyed on early in the week was that edge where you can see it here, where the mat actually meets the actual reed head.
Okay.
And would try to punch that edge quite often. And a lot of my bites came from there. As the week progressed and the cold front and the water temperature got colder and colder each day, it seemed like I had to go further and further back into the reed head to get bit. A lot of that was probably wind driven also. Just the fact that it was so windy and volatile out here on the outside edge that they probably just felt more comfortable and more stable in the very middle.
Yeah, it probably helped your boat positioning too, to be able to just get right up close to it a little bit. And
yeah, it was much easier just to let my boat, you know, and I probably did some of that too. I probably had my boat parked on a fish at times. I mean, there's no way I couldn't have. But it was much easier boat positioning wise just to let my boat blow into the weeds, into the reed heads, and then, you know, cover them more effectively that way. These brown ones, see where it's brown and dead and like there's no holes?
Laid over in there?
Yep. The brown seems to warm up. Earlier in the week they were in the holes. You know, when the weather was nice, like the holes in there, you'd flip to the holes and that's where you'd get bit. And I really think those fish were probably spawning. Some of them were extremely defined holes in the center of these heads. And but as it got colder, that went away and they seemed to be more in the thicker places where there weren't holes, and the brown was on top, and I think it has to do with the fact that those brown is the dead cane that's laid over on the water and probably creates a mat and some warmth, especially when the sun comes out. Like today, we'll probably see alligators and snakes and that's where
up on top of
that's where they always lay, is on that brown.
Yeah. How were you working your bait when you flipped it in there? And did it vary, or did you have sort of one recipe? It
changed through the week. When they were aggressive earlier in the week, I worked it just like I am right now. I'd pump it 3, you know, 2 to 5 times. 2 to 3 is kind of where you want to stay, just because you want to cover water quickly. But I was getting some bites on day 1 and 2 on the 4th and 5th pump. So, but I was pumping it pretty aggressively. You know, that thing's falling. It's 1.5 ounce weight, and it's going to the bottom, right?
Yeah.
And so I want it to do the same thing coming back up. I want to rip it so that it comes back up, and it, you know, forces them to get that reaction bite out of them if they're there. As the week progressed and the water got colder and they got more finicky and I had to change that BB Cricket, I went to a lighter weight, and it was more of just a bounce, you know, just a real light bounce off the bottom, and then reel it up towards the top of the mat and shake it a little bit and then go to the next one.
Now, you said if it goes bump, you feel it. Is this, when they bite it, are you setting the hook right away?
If
I thought, take it a little?
If it's that dong, you know, that really hard aggressive bite, that's on their initial fall. Absolutely, I probably, you know, I'll show you. It's not an instant hook set. There's definitely some wait time there, but
all right,
let's say it's falling right now and it just went thung. So all I'm gonna do is click my bail and I'm gonna reel tension on that until my rod starts to load. And then once it starts loading, then I'm gonna pull, and you know, once that everything's tight, then I just pull on it. It's not really a hook set like what we do when we're flipping bushes and willows.
All right, well hopefully
with fluorocarbon. It's a different hook set.
Yeah, hopefully we've got a shot to demonstrate that a little bit later on here.
The deal is this big weight. And so and it's probably an issue, it's an issue that I used to have, I know, when I first started doing this. We have that tendency to get that bite and you drop your rod and you just crack him. You know, there he is, I'm gonna crack him. Well, when you do that with this braid and this big rod, there's no stretch, and then you've got this big weight, and you throw slack in your line, and then when you set the hook and pop it, that big weight comes up to the fish's mouth and it just blows that fish's mouth. And you're gonna lose 90% of them. You are not gonna get a hook in them. If you watch videos of Mike Sherman or JT Kinney, Scott Martin, Randall Tharp, you watch those guys flip down here, and time after time you'll see the exact same hook set. They get bit, they reel down, get pressure on the rod, let the rod start to load, and then they just pull.
You're just about setting the hook on you're just about letting the fish hook itself basically before you even really drive the hook home.
Yeah, the only thing that's driving it's once you finally get that final pull at the top of your rod and it's loaded. And the rod's really important too, you know, the rod, it's got that really good parabolic bend, you know, and that has a lot to do with keeping your fish hooked up, because with this braid, you know, if it gets any slack at all, he's got that 1.5 ounce weight in his mouth, and it's real easy to jar that hook loose. The ends of these heads were always high percentage areas also, whether it was that end, this end, you know, of any of them. they were things that I focused more on than just the centers of them.
Okay.
Earlier in the week when the weather was nice, I really caught some good fish off the smaller reed heads, the isolated. You know, one like that one right out there that's out there by itself, and it's not much bigger than a couple of boats.
Yeah.
But on the windy days, they just didn't, they offered very little cover, you know, because the water was so rough.
Yep.
And so I stayed with the bigger ones, the larger reed heads on the days that the wind blew so hard.
So you were catching fish that you think were spawning. I assume you caught some really fat ones, so you were catching some pre-spawn fish in here too. There
was definitely post-spawn fish in here
as well?
also, absolutely. I think a lot of the fish are probably spawning out along these hay fields, you know, in holes out here in this hay grass.
Yep.
And I think this is a transition spot where they come and stage before coming and going.
So you flipped a sweet beaver with a punch skirt the first couple days,
Yep.
and then you went to the BB cricket on the last day. Going to the cricket when it was cold out to try and downsize, that's kind of an obvious Florida thing. Why was the beaver and the punch skirt your starting choice?
The beaver and the punch skirt, if we got them both tied on here, I want to show you, pull yours in and we'll look and I'll show you the difference.
Pull mine in and some cattails?
Yeah, pull some cattails in.
All right.
Rig that thing up and, yeah.
Yeah, just like that right there.
I mean, hold it in your hand and look at the size of the difference. I mean, there's a
Yeah, it's
major
a big change.
big difference in profile. This is a much larger looking bait.
Yep.
And early in the week, I really wanted to go with the largest profile that I could get. If it cost me missing out on some bites, I was fine with that because, you know, I was getting 20, 25 bites a day at that point. If it's a few smaller fish, if it got in front of a 7-pounder, I wanted her to eat it.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of my process on that. By day 3 of the tournament, I started the day with that 8-pounder on this big profile bait, but I was struggling just to catch 5, and I wasn't getting a bite. And when I did get a couple of bites, they had just taken the tail. I'd set the hook and my tail would be gone, so they're just grabbing this.
Yeah.
And so I went to the BB cricket, but I still was pitching this 1.5 ounce weight with it and wasn't successful. And so day 4 we started, in the first hour I started with this same bait that I've been catching them, and I was like, the water temperature had cooled some more, and I thought, I'm really going to have to do some changing here because I'm not changing areas at this point.
Yeah, you knew the fish were here.
And I knew that I'd already tried the cricket the day before with the big weight, so that's when I went down to a 3/4 ounce weight. I played with a 1/2, but it was just impossible, and I think I finally ended up settling. I think that's a 1.
Okay.
But it's got teeth marks on it.
Yeah, because they've been taking the whole thing.
Yeah, that's right. So when I got down in weight size, went down in hook size, and then put that BB cricket on. It's got a 4/0 hook on it. This one had a 5.
All right.
Just the overall presentation was much more finesse for the cold front situation.
And it definitely helped you out.
It did, absolutely. It gave me the opportunity to still get bit.
Now, how about with the wind on the second day? I know a lot of people probably put it in your head, well, what about trying to change up and play the wind and run north? Did you ever consider that, or did you just know that I caught 25 pounds there the day before, I was going to go out and do it again?
I knew how many bites I'd had. A lot of that went back to the philosophy that I'm talking about right now. The size of the area and the potential that it has of what lives here is just so much greater than anywhere that I had been in practice. And I just come off a day that I had 25 bites the first day of the tournament. So, and I'd had that many the day in practice that I found them also. So I knew that with the wind and the cold front, I was going to get less bites. But I felt like with these reed heads being so big and thick that I could do just what I did as far as boat positioning and just let it blow me into the reed heads and just take my time and flip it apart. I would not get as many bites, but my biggest concern on day 2 with the wind was if like I said, I didn't know how far I was off the main lake. I thought there was a chance that I could come in here and it would be rolling 2 foot tall in here over it all. And if that was the case, then I was going to have to turn around and go somewhere else.
Yeah. Yeah, but luckily, I mean, there's enough of this stuff down here and you're far enough back that it can...
I ended up being far enough back that it broke it.
It broke the waves.
It sure did.
Didn't really break the wind, but...
No, but it kept the watercolor, you know, from being churned up, kept the water from being churned up, and And that was the biggest part for me being able to catch them down here 2 days in the south end. You know, historically, a lot of guys don't fish the south end just for that simple fact that over a 4-day tournament, you're going to get a front this time of year and you get blown out. And so they would much rather spend their time getting on fish on the north end, and then when that front does come, and it always blows from the north, northwest, and then you're protected.
But you tried that in practice and just never found enough up there? And
I spent my first 2 days of practice up there, and I even caught a giant. I mean, I thought it was a 10-pounder. It was a bigger fish than anything I caught in the tournament. It was a big fish. It was all by itself. I got one bite. I hadn't had a bite in 4 hours when I got it. It was on a reed head up there in Eagle Bay, and I flipped the rest of that evening trying to find some more bites around it. I came back the next morning trying to find some more bites around it. I spent 2 of my 3 days practice up on the north end of the lake. Never went to Harney Pond and stuff though. Actually, my game plan was the 3rd day to go to Harney Pond. And somewhere in my mind, I just thought, you know, I've been all over up there on the north end, and I really wanted to look at Pelican Bay, and I really wanted to look at South Bay. And when I got in here, it looked right, and I instantly started getting bites.
So Brad, you mentioned earlier that, you know, having that parabolic bend is key.
Correct.
When you're setting the hook. And I mean, you had 2 rods specially made up for this, so what are we dealing with here? Well,
we wanted 8-foot rods that were light to handle, balanced, and so I had my friend at Brandon Mosley make me these rods, and Mosley's Rod Works. These actually have weights on the ends of them. These actually screw off.
Oh, no kidding.
And there's multiple weights on there. See that? Did you notice that?
I was wondering why it looked weird, but I never thought that it was weights.
It's weights, and you can actually adjust the weight balance from 4 all the way down to 1 or none.
Okay.
And what it actually does is it takes away some of the fact that rod's 8 foot long, you know, and then you put that 1.5 ounce weight on it at the end of it, and it just helps balance that rod, which makes it feel lighter. One of the other big things about it is that the rod on this is the parabolic bend on this rod. How it, you know, when you look at it, how it bends all the way through, and that's real critical with landing fish.
Okay.
With these big weights inside those bass's mouths.
Yeah, and I guess being able to have that weight on the butt, you can fish a big 8-foot rod, and it still remains balanced.
Yeah, and it's just easier on you throughout the day. It doesn't feel as heavy, you know. It's not like holding a 2x6 all day long. But these are really light rods. They're balanced right. They feel great. I haven't had a problem with them in the world all week. They honestly, I flipped with a bunch of different rods through the years, and these are by far the best big weight rods that I've ever used.
Well guys, we went out here with Bradley Hallman today, and he showed us pretty much everything you need to know about how he caught his fish this week. I wish we'd actually got one in the boat, but man, I know more about flipping because of it, and I hope next time you get down to Florida, you do too.